Good morning, afternoon, evening, or whatever time is it when you are watching this video. It takes a while before you completely memorize every single step of the brewing process, so I decided to make available a quick home brewing instruction guide for all those who are just getting started and need some guidance. There are three methods to brewing beer. There's all grain brewing, there's extract brewing, and there is kit brewing. This guide is going to be for extract brewers, although anyone can kind of benefit from this, but you should have a home brewing kit already, and if not, you can look at the link in the description box and look at our home brewing equipment article for a detailed list. Also, if you need a visual, you can also sign up to our e-letter and access our free step-by-step home beer brewing instruction videos. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. The first step here is going to be to clean and sanitize. First and foremost, you gotta remove just about every object from your work area so that you can thoroughly clean using a clean cloth with water and mild soap. You will then want to rinse off the area with a wet rag until all soap has been removed, and once everything is clean, you now have to sanitize. Sanitizing kills about 99.9% of bacteria not visible that cleaning doesn't get rid of. But once your work area is clean and sanitized, you also want to start cleaning and sanitizing your equipment. Normally the way that I do this is by cleaning and sanitizing my fermenting bucket, and if you use a carboy, I recommend picking up a bucket just for cleaning and sanitizing. I fill up the bucket with water and I add iodophor. And then as I clean the rest of the equipment, I just dump it into the bucket with iodophor so it gets soaked in the iodophor solution while I boil. About 80% of all flavors in beer come from poor sanitation habits, so don't take this for granted. Next step is to steep the grains. You gotta extract the sugars from your specialty grains before you can mix your base malt into the water. And to do this, you'll want to grab a muslin bag and fill it up with your grains, just making sure that you don't add more than 1 pound of grains to the bag. If you have more than 1 pound of specialty grains, then you will need to get extra muslin bags. You then want to bring a couple gallons of water to a temperature of about 155 to 165 degrees and soak the grain bags in the hot water for about 25 to 30 minutes. You'll want to stir every once in a while without disturbing the grain bag, and once this is done, you want to remove the grain bag from the water and place it on a strainer on top of the pot, and take a cup of hot water and rinse the grain bag with it. Once the grain bag is done dripping, it's time for the next step, which is boiling and mixing your base malts. So once sugar gets into the water, the solution is called wort. You want to add more water to your pot and bring it to a boil. How much water depends on what your stove can handle. I normally like to boil about 3 to 4 gallons and then top off with water after the boil. With less water in the pot, your beer will get darker and you won't get as much bitterness out of hops. So to bring to a boil, you'll want to have the lid on to help it. However, as soon as you start to get a slow rolling boil, you'll want to remove the lid and keep it off. You want to be careful with boilovers at this point, since foam will start forming and it will act like a lid trapping in the heat and making the wort rise. Once you're done with that, you want to start adding your bittering hops. Once your wort starts to boil, it is time to add your bittering hops. You'll need to boil the wort for at least 60 minutes. And most recipes will have you add your hops as soon as the boil starts. However, if you're not boiling hops for 60 minutes, then you should wait a few minutes before adding hops to make sure that you boil the wort for at least 60 minutes. Your bittering hops should normally be hops with high alpha acid units, unless you are brewing certain styles of beers like Hefeweizens that don't require much bittering hops, in which case noble hops are used. After that, you want to start adding your finishing hops and any other finnings. Finishing hops are usually added towards the end of the boil because we don't want to extract bitterness out of them. We just want the aroma. Usually these are thrown into the wort about 15 minutes before it is done boiling, usually about 5 minutes before, and sometimes 1 or 2 minutes before it is done boiling. And some recipes don't have finishing hops at all. Also, some styles of beer have you add clarifying agents like Irish moss to reduce the haze in beer and make it look clear. Other recipes will also have you add extra liquid malt extract about 20 minutes before the end of the boil, which is sometimes referred to as the knockout. Once your hops are added, the next step is to cool your wort. Bacteria grows easier at warm temperature, so as soon as the boil is over, you gotta place the lid back in the pot and remove from the heat. The most effective way to cool down a wort is to submerge the pot in an ice bath and let it sit for about 15 to 20 minutes. You're going to be adding new ice as it melts really fast in the beginning until the wort cools and it reaches yeast pitching temperature. Obviously, higher volume worts will take longer to cool down, which is a drawback of boiling with more water. Some people use wort chillers with a copper coil. However, I personally don't like to use these because you have to take the lid off. An ice bath will normally do the job. Once your wort has been cooled, you want to pitch your yeast. In home brewing, pitching simply means to pour. So once your wort has reached a temperature of about 60 to 70 degrees, you are ready to pitch your yeast. I recommend you use liquid yeast, which comes in smack packs. It is good to prepare your yeast at the beginning of the boil if you're going to pitch straight from the pack, although I am going to recommend using a yeast starter. If you don't use a yeast starter, just make sure that you have enough yeast to ferment your wort. Now, before you pitch your yeast, be sure to aerate the wort, which can be done by pouring your wort back and forth between the boiling pot and the fermenting bucket a couple of times, and then you are ready to pitch your yeast. Once that is done, you want to ferment your home brew. Now, to ferment your brew, you want to use a plastic bucket with a lid that has a grommet drilled hole and place an airlock in it. If you're using a carboy, then you will get a rubber stopper with a hole to place your airlock over it. Then you want to store your bucket at about 60 to 70 degrees for ales or 45 to 55 degrees for lagers. The fermentation process takes about 10 to 14 days, so it is time to be patient. The only way that you know your fermentation is done is by checking the gravity reading and making sure that you have hit your target gravity. You will then want to prime and bottle your beer. Once the beer is done fermenting, you're going to need to prime the beer and get it ready to bottle. You'll need a bottling bucket that you can attach a filler tube to. And before transferring your beer from the fermenter, you want to prepare your priming solution by mixing in corn sugar with enough water to cover it, which is usually about a cup, and heat it up in the microwave. Once the solution becomes clear, then you want to throw that priming sugar into your bottling bucket, and that way when you fill up the bucket, the beer mixes up with it. Then it's just simply a matter of getting a capper, sanitize your bottle caps and your beer bottles, and fill from the bottom up. Once you do that, you store the bottles at room temperature for another 2 to 3 weeks, and voila, time to drink up and enjoy. So that's pretty much a basic set of instructions. If you want to get more information, or again if you want to see a video of actually me doing this, you can visit our website or click the link in the description box. And please don't forget to share, rate, and comment on this video. Talk to you later.